Hello and welcome to Gardener's World. It is a beautiful spring day here at Damson Farm and the bulbs are just looking absolutely magnificent. But everywhere I look as I pick through this meadow, I'm having to avoid seedlings. There are so many plants. But that's the wonderful thing about plants. They really do come up everywhere. There you go. Even here, on this little bit of gravel on the edge of the driveway, there are so many different seedlings coming up. But this time of year, one of the things that I really love is primrose as a kind of herald of spring. And they do seed themselves everywhere, so I'm actually going to dig some of these up, because as beautiful as they are here, they're possibly not in their best position. And it's just a case of prizing those roots out as intact as you can. And now is the perfect time to divide them up a bit and plant them in other places, so you have that spring herald all around the garden, wherever you can. It's just a gentle case of prizing rather than yanking. And then hopefully there's a good root system on these. There we go. That's a healthy seedling. Now, primroses have a really interesting way of sharing genetic material, making seedlings basically. They have male and female parts within the flowers, but you get two distinct kinds of flowers. There are pin-eye flowers, they're the female flowers, and the thrum-eye flowers, which have got the male parts nearer the front. So this is a thrum-eye, and if you look carefully inside that flower, you can see the anthers at the front. The female parts will still be in there, but they'll be much further back, whereas this one is a pin eye. So that's the stigma there that you can see right in the middle of the flower, like a pinhead. And that's the female part of the flower. So that just means that the plant isn't going to pollinate itself. It will be pollinated with a different plant, which gives it more genetic diversity and hopefully makes healthier seedlings. One of the great things about primroses, as a very early spring flower, they're great for emerging wildlife. So things like carder bees or hairy-footed flower bees, or even butterflies that have overwintered, will feed off the nectar in these because they are full of nectar. So it makes them just really valuable if you're trying to extend your pollinator season. Now I'm going to leave the rest here because they do look beautiful, but there is a spot in the garden I have in mind to put these. I think they're going to look lovely. This is the area where my primroses are going to go, but there's a bit of clearing to do first. So I have been asked by Alison, who owns Damson Farm, to sort of take on this space. And what I want to do with it is really turn it into a wildlife-focused area of the garden. Already, she has put a hedgehog house and insect habitat in this space, so it's doing it a little bit, but there's so much more that we can do here. So you can see the road is just there, and obviously for wildlife that's not good because they have the risk of being run over there. So if we can create instead a hedge or a corridor along this edge where they can move through, and that will also baffle the sound of cars as they go by and make the garden feel more peaceful. With this sort of thing, whatever you choose, whether it's hedging, climbers or the plants in the beds, it's all about maximising the potential for different wildlife. So choosing things that have berries, that have flowers, that have leaves, that are food sources. So within this space, it's a huge untapped potential. Now, my instinct as a gardener would be to clear this whole area, get all of the ground cover up, turn the soil, mulch the soil, have a lovely blank canvas and then plant into that. But as a wildlife gardener, I have to overrule all of those instincts and recognise these plants for what they are, which is lovely native wildflower. So there's celandine, even this dandelion is so fantastic for bumblebees. So instead, I'm going to let this ground cover stay and just carve out little holes into which I can plant my primroses. You could at this stage also, if you wanted, divide them into ones that you can spread all over, which I think I'll do, because then next year there might be a bit more of a carpet here. Wildlife doesn't like neatness. This is a hazel seedling, which is a really beneficial tree to wildlife, but there's a big one here. And I really, in this space, I'm looking to target bird species. Now, we gardeners love to feed the birds in our gardens, but actually the RSPB have been looking at this and they've slightly updated their advice on it. The advice now is to feed them safely and feed them seasonally. So that means that in the spring and the summer, rather than putting out seeds and nuts, instead it means growing as much of the wild food sources as you can. So berries, seeds, and even planting things that will bring in the insects that many birds like to feed on. This is particularly important for birds like finches, who are experiencing a lot of disease, and that comes from when they all gather on one feeder. And greenfinches have now been put on the red list. And rather than having seeds where they can all gather in one space and spread disease, having things like rose hips and teasels planted through the garden allows them to feed at a nice, safe distance and hopefully to start to recover. And here, I really want to make that difference. What I am going to plant in this space, instead of the hazel, is a Guelder rose, Viburnum opulus. It's a really, really beautiful shrub. It's covered in white flowers, which then turn to the most beautiful iridescent red berries, perfect for things like redwings and fieldfares and blackbirds. I've got 3 or 4 of these, which I can spread through this space and create a lovely hedgerow. Even if you have a very small garden, this is a really nice choice. There, that should settle in. Now, this area is not going to be one big, quick sort of makeover, but slowly over the year I'm going to keep adding and adding more wildlife-friendly species here, so it'll be lovely to see it transformed by the end of the season. Now, for all of us, spring brings this lovely energy to the garden, but for Mina Wilson in Birmingham, it heralds the beginning of a very special flower season.
Hi, my name's Mina and welcome to my garden here in the West Midlands. Around these parts, we love a daffodil. When I got this garden, it was just a patch of green lawn and I knew I wanted just to have flowers everywhere. I discovered my love of daffodils and I decided I'll just get one daffodil, and before I knew it, I had over 120 pots and 8 beds filled with daffodils. They come in so many different shapes and sizes. You've got the really small, delicate ones, and then you've got big trumpets, and then you've also got the ruffles, doubles. There are just so many different shapes and sizes. It's not all just a trumpet yellow daffodil that you see on the roadside. So this is a particular favourite of mine. It's called Ballroom Belle, and probably to most people doesn't look like your average daffodil. When you look at a big boy like this one with its yellow trumpet and yellow petals, and then you've got something as delicate as this with its little hoops and its creaminess. And I think this is really a good one for growing in pots. So whether you have a big garden or just a balcony, there's definitely a daffodil available for everyone. So I just want to share some of my top tips with you. And the first one is, after you've watered your daffodils, because daffodils love to be in well-drained soil, but with moisture, you want to make sure that they're fully drained. Now, I know this might look a little bit extreme, but if you tip the pots onto the side, it helps drainage. It means they can't get waterlogged as easily. Well, squirrels don't always like daffodil bulbs to eat. Unlike tulips, they do like to dig. So what I do with my daffodils that are in pots, I just cover them with a cage like this. If you're not fancy like me, you can just use a cage and put it on like that, or an upturned basket. So this beautiful daffodil here is called Fencourt Jewel, and it's a multi-headed daffodil. It's got such a delicate scent to it, which is absolutely beautiful in the morning. Like when I have it in the greenhouse and I open the door up and it hits me full in the face, there's just nothing better. Sets me up for the working day. So after a long, wet winter in the UK, to see their trumpets, it's like it sounds the horn of spring. It brings me such joy, and they're just a happy flower. I hope you've enjoyed seeing my daffodils today, and I hope you find one to fall in love with really soon.
I love how happy those daffodils made me, and I totally understand it at the end of winter. Ugh, the relief of seeing spring flowers. If it brings you joy, I think, then grow it. Hi, Alison.
Hiya.
It's so nice to see your garden in the spring. All the structures and everything just look so beautiful. So what are you doing here?
So I'm just digging up some of this. This is quite established Hacknacloa macra.
Right.
And I've got some new beds on the other side of the house, so I thought it would work there.
Hacknacloa is such a good grass. It's a really nicely performing one. Quite neat and quite small. And this is the green form, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a really long season performer as well. Yeah, perfect.
Right, should we carry it through? So this is your redevelopment area?
Yes, yeah, I'm quite excited about this, having a new area to plant up.
Yeah. What made you want to do it?
Well, I think it was the successive hot summers we've been having because there's quite a lot of paving here. I've got quite a few metal containers, but I think last summer, having to water almost every night, it just didn't seem sustainable either from a time point of view and also from a water point of view.
The more increasing hosepipe bans in some parts of the country means you can't actually water. So I guess you're now planting in the ground instead of in pots.
Yeah, exactly. And there were big slabs and a lot of concrete underneath.
So this beautiful soil that's here, presumably it took a lot of work to get to that stage.
Yeah, so I just used soil that came from the garden. It's mostly topsoil, and brought in a little bit of manure. Okay, that's the spirea.
Okay. Guessing that will go sort of near the back because that will get quite big.
Yes, it will. I wanted the beds to be winter and early spring focused, particularly as this area is near the house.
Okay,
So that's a Daphne white queen.
So that winter scented as well. That will be beautiful.
Yeah.
This is a brunnera called Betty Bowering. A brunnera is a perennial forget-me-not. Normally, they're blue, so things like Jack Frost are fairly common, but this is a lovely white one. And in that bed, it should really bring a sparkle in the spring and then go very, very quiet and fade into the background through the summer. They'll be a really good performer, and they're very good in shade. So if you have a difficult shady spot in the garden, they're great plants to get hold of if you can. This is a Daphne, which is a really lovely late winter flowering shrub in this form. This is called White Queen. What Daphne does is it fills the whole air with scent at a time of year when there's very little else in flower, so it's really, really precious for that. But they can be a bit tricky to establish, and I have had them die on me before, and when you spent a lot of money on them, that's heartbreaking. So when you first plant it, just make sure you really look after it for that first year. They don't like to be too wet, so don't plant it somewhere that's going to get waterlogged. They also don't like to get too dry, so especially for that first year, just water it in long dry periods. And they don't like to get too cold, so somewhere sheltered and protected, like this one by the wall. And I think Alison will fleece this and keep it covered until the spring really warms up. And they don't like to be in really hot baking sun either. There we go. Grow well. Taking plants from containers and putting them in the ground will save you work on watering in the summer. But some of us don't have the chance to do that. And if you have a garden like a balcony or just some decking or paving that you can't dig up because you rent the property, then you will need to grow in pots. And to stop watering becoming a huge problem or the soil from heating up too much, there are simple tricks that you can use. Insulating is basically what you're going to try to do, and mulching as well. There are really nice, environmentally friendly ways of doing this. So this is hessian that you can pick up for free from coffee shops. That can be placed on the inside of the pot itself. So that could work really well. Another thing that you can use is coir, which is used for lining hanging baskets. Now, that's a really good insulation and quite good structurally as well. But what I think I'm going to use is some sheep's wool. So this is material that you can get in packages. A lot more companies are using sustainable packaging now, but you can also buy this as a product, and that has an amazing insulating effect. And you can also use it as a mulch as well, so really help to prevent moisture loss from the surface of the soil and keep the temperatures cooler in there. But what you don't want to do is go into a field and collect sheep's wool from the ground, because it could have been treated with dewormers and all kinds of chemicals. So really avoid that and go for something that you know is chemical free. And in that vein, don't use things like dyed wool, because you don't know what that chemical might be. Newspaper has ink on it, so just think about microplastics, think about chemicals that might leach into the soil, especially if you're growing food. But cardboard, paper, wool will all do a really good job. There we go. Now that's full, I'm going to be planting some peas in there. This is a dwarf pea, which is specifically bred for growing in containers, so it should be very, very happy here. And it will fill the space through the spring, right up until the end of June, early July. I love peas. They're one of the nicest things to grow because they're really easy, they're really beautiful, the flowers are lovely, and then they're obviously delicious. This is a Monge 2 style, so you eat everything. Right, so I'm going to sow these quite densely. About 3 times the depth of a seed is how deep it goes, if you're unsure, but it's always written on the packet, so check that. And that's going to be really quite filled. The idea being that hopefully we'll get good germination. If we do get good germination, we can thin and pick the shoots and eat them because they make a good salad crop. And if we don't get good germination, we'll still have enough to fill this pot. And because it's vegetables, my instinct is to make them slightly neat and symmetrical. You don't really need to do that. Now, it might look a little bit excessive having such a big pot just for little seeds like this, but that's very intentional. And the idea is it saves me having to water. A bigger pot will hold onto more water, a smaller pot will dry out more quickly. So by putting these in a nice big generous container, hopefully, it means I won't need to water it anywhere near as often. Still, with a vegetable, you wouldn't want it to dry out. So probably if the weather is very warm, I would still water this every day or every other day. But if it was a small pot, it might be twice a day that you're needing to keep on top of that. The other thing about a big pot is it won't warm up so quickly either, so the temperatures stay a little bit cooler. Now, ordinarily, if you were sowing peas, you'd want to put some sort of obelisk in for them to grow up, but these are dwarfing peas, so they're not climbing. So this is now done. I'll just cover it over. Give it water to start the germination process. Keep it watered until you see the first shoots coming. And then these will be harvested by about June. And from then on, you then pull the peas out when they've all finished producing their pods and replace it with a crop that can take a little bit higher temperatures. There we go. It's lovely to be thinking of warm summer days with the cold wind. But last August, Joe went to Cornwall, lucky man, to visit a garden where the planting has specifically been designed to withstand the elements.
We may like to be beside the seaside, but our plants don't always feel the same. A sea view may be a dream, but get it wrong, and gardening on the coast can be a nightmare. There's quite a bit to think about.
Strong winds and salt-laden air can destroy your dahlias and wreak havoc with your hemerocallis. So creating windbreaks and choosing plants for the right conditions is absolutely key to successful gardening in this part of the country.
At Crooksillick Manor in Truro, Annie Agnew has mastered this to create a garden that can take anything the Cornish coast can throw at it.
Hi, Annie. Beautiful hedges, I've got to say.
Yeah, they're coming on.
What do you mean coming on? They're pretty mature, really. How long have they been in?
They're 10 years old, so they're not fully grown yet. We, right at the beginning, designed this to try and break up the space and break up the wind, because we live in Cornwall. And Cornwall has got wind. Cornwall has wind from every direction possible. And particularly here, we've got problems with the wind coming up the valley from the sea, and it causes a lot of damage. We've lost massive trees.
I turn up on one of the calmest days of the year,
Totally calm.
but I can imagine in the winter it must just rip through here. And these hedges, they're fantastic because they filter the wind, don't they?
You need this filtered wind to protect big perennial beds. So making the hedges into whirling forms and ovals and long extensions that wrap around parts of the garden really sorts the wind out.
But also with the topography of the local area, you know, the hills beyond, these sort of rolling shapes of the hedges, they just work beautifully.
It did seem
And
to.
the different heights, they're doing a lot of things, these hedges, aren't they?
They're separating the planting areas too into really distinct planting zones.
And you've got lots of other evergreen structural plants here.
So we've used a lot of pittosporum. We've placed them fairly close together so that they make a pseudo hedge.
But
And
without
then-
clipping into
without
one.
clipping them into
That's
one
lovely.
line. And we've used them in the borders as structural elements to hold the border together visually.
And these hoherias,
Those are fantastic. They're one of my favourite plants. It's Hoheria sextilosa. Beautiful white starry flowers that the bees love. The whole tree hums for about 5 weeks.
what about the rest of the planting? What's the rationale behind that? The colour schemes, what you want to grow?
Yeah, well, plant greed. I wanted plants from everywhere in the world, and all kinds. That's why the evergreen structures are so important, because it controls the mess, basically.
What's striking here is the sheer diversity of plants, not just growing, but thriving. And as you move through each carefully designed environment, the character of the planting shifts. The colours, the forms, the entire mood of the garden evolves around you, revealing a new story at every turn.
This is Annie's hot garden, and you can tell there's a microclimate in here. It's a walled space, and out there the breeze is picking up, but in here it's incredibly still. And there's a lot of exotic plants that are really thriving. We've got hot reds, we've got oranges, we've got yellows, all working together beautifully. And things like this dahlia, one of my favourites, Chat Noir, really doing its thing. It's a lovely cactus form, and it's looking very happy indeed. It looks great sitting above this foliage, just hovering through this border here. Over in this corner, we've got a very strong colour theme coming through. We've got yellows and oranges and whites and beautiful foliage all mixed in together, very exotic planting. Things like this canna, this is called Ra. I love the simple yellow flowers, the glaucous foliage. And this is a ginger lily next to it. Again, it's got a really impressive foliage and the flower is just starting to open up. Here in Cornwall, the climate is incredibly mild, so Annie can leave these plants through the winter in the ground, mulch over them, and they'll come up in spring. But in a lot of parts of the UK, you won't get away with that, but you can grow them in containers and then put them into a protected spot over winter and bring them on next spring. And one plant I just have to mention while I'm here is that Tetrapanax rex at the back, the rice paper plant. Now, it shows again how mild it is here because it's developed a trunk like a tree or a large shrub. In colder areas, it will die back, you cut it down to the ground and it will come back up again. But it looks absolutely stunning at that height. Now Annie calls this her silver border, but I'm going to call it her silver, green, blue and white border. But she's really gone with this theme and it works and it's very different to the exotic garden, which is full of vibrant colours, it's energising. This is calming, it's a very tranquil space. And she's chosen plants with small leaves. So there's not big drama, small leaves that just work really nicely together and create a lovely textural balance throughout. And it's that creates the calming mood of this space. So things like this veronicastrum, we've got the echinops in front there, there's some lavender down there, and we've even got pittosporums, and they're all working really nicely together. And the bees are just all over these veronicastrum, so the wildlife loves it too.
Beyond the wall garden, Annie has created another haven for flora and fauna, carved out of the hillside and sheltered by trees.
Wow, this pond is stunning and a magnet for wildlife. And when you think of wildlife ponds, you think, oh, maybe they're a bit amoebic shaped, a little bit messy around the edges, a bit scrappy. But here, Annie has shown that they can be incredibly stylish too. And what I like is she's gone really big with it. It fills this space. And if you're making a pond, go as big as you can. Once you've dug the hole and put the liner in, it might look enormous. But once you fill it with water and put some pond plants in, the whole space will shrink. And Annie has been really restrained with the planting. We've got aquatics like the water lilies just covering the water surface. There's oxygenators in there, and then marginals around the outside, breaking the edge of the pond. And one of my favourites, Thalia delbata over there with its architectural foliage. It looks wonderful. Yeah, this is how to do it. As a designer, I find Annie's process so interesting. It started with the hedges that she put in, sinuous lines cutting through the landscape to reduce the wind, but also to link with the landscape beyond and to divide the whole garden up into separate rooms. Those rooms are all different shapes, but she's created environments in which to grow her favourite plants. And it's all about the plants. And she said strong Cornish winds, no problem at all.
I know from experience myself that gardening right by the sea is not always a holiday. But having a greenhouse like this just gives you the luxury of protecting your plants from all of those elements. And this one's full of beautiful things. Oh, and look! These are the Brad's Atomic Grape tomato seeds that I soaked last year to get all of the jelly off them so that they'd be ready to re-sow. And look, here they are, coming up beautifully, ready to be pricked out, I reckon. It's nice to see it all happening, isn't it, in the spring? And then by the end of this year, there'll be more tomatoes to harvest more seeds from. But what many of us have actually is packets of seeds. We buy them. If you're like me, you'll buy way too many. You'll use some and there'll be lots left over, and you're not always sure whether they're viable or not. Now, some, like tomatoes, have quite a long viability, but others like salads, lettuce, brassicas are much shorter. And if you've got lots of packets that you're not sure they'll work, rather than spending a whole tray of compost on sowing them only to find them failing, there's a much better way of testing viability, which is sowing them in very small rows like this. So you have 5 different varieties just in this one tray. It's very simple to do, and you can prick out the big healthy ones if you want to. So what I have is 3 separate seeds of brassicas, 2 kale and 1 broccoli. There are just a few left in each, so I'm going to mix them up. There we go. And then the last kale. There we go, look. Brassica seeds are so lovely. They're tiny little round spheres. And they need quite a deep root run. So if you are sowing them into modules, give them nice deep modules. And this pot is perfect for that. So they should grow really nicely into here. Normally you'd start any brassica off in a module or a seed tray, but when you're eventually planting it, they want to be at least 30 centimetres apart because they get pretty big. But here, they'll be perfect for seedlings. So really quite a dense sowing because, as I said, we don't know how many of them will come up. They may not all be viable still. That's that. So I'll just put a little more compost over the top of this to cover them and then firm it nicely so that they make good contact. That will greatly help their germination. Now, you could do this with salad as well, like mustard, got rockets, lettuces. There's some really interesting kinds of salad leaf as well. And what we'll do is just water this and then watch it. Once they start to come up, you would pick the best, the strongest ones, and you would carefully prick them out, taking the roots and potting them into something like this and growing them on, and then eventually planting them out into the veg garden. For everything else that's left behind, you just let that grow up. It becomes a mix, and then you can just snip it off and it will regrow and hopefully last for a good few weeks as a cut and come again microgreen. Now, microgreens are essentially any vegetable that you would eat the leaves off. So you could use herbs, you could use coriander, parsley, basil, mixed salad, brassicas, cabbages, anything like that. You can just keep chopping and eat the greens. What you wouldn't use is obviously any kind of cut flower that you're growing from seed or trying their viability, or vegetables that you actually eat the fruits of. So cucumbers, squashes, tomatoes, peppers, tomatillos, anything like that. I wouldn't use as a microgreen, but if you know you can eat the leaves, then they taste delicious when they're tiny. There we go, that's done. Now, starting any plant, whether food or flower, on its journey is so enriching, and there's a whole kingdom to choose from. But for Liz Carter in Cheshire, one particular species is out of this world.
Some flowers are in your face. Erythroniums aren't. You've got to get down there and look at them. They're so ethereal. They're so delicate. And there's such variation from the yellows that are bold through to the very pale pinky ones. And if you're walking on a slightly breezy day, you can see them all dancing. I'm Liz, welcome to my woodland garden in the Wirral, where I've been since 1963. I'm sitting here surrounded by Erythronium revolutum, which is one of the species. The display here is a a pleasure every time I open the garden gate and walk in. And it gets better every year because the more I spread them, the better it gets. Just collect your dried seed and scatter it in your garden. Then all you need is patience, because they'll germinate the next year and you have to wait 3 to 5 years for them to flower, but it's well worth it. At the back of my mind, it reminds me that this is a bit of Californian glamour in the spring. It was 1961 and 62. I was living in California. My husband went out to do a postdoctoral fellowship, and I flew out to join him. I had a job working on stage 4 of Saturn, which was the bit that went to the moon.
So you were part of the space race?
I was part of the space race, dear, yes. Fondest memories are definitely to do with being in the mountains. We could walk up to probably about 10,000, 11,000 feet. And there's the intrepid couple. So as the snow melts up in the Sierra, the Erythroniums weren't coming through. We had enjoyed being, I suppose, in the wild country. And we came back and were looking to find somewhere to live. We were desperately looking for a house buried in the country somewhere. And we finally found. Not only was the house derelict, but the garden was derelict as well. Of course, we had absolutely no money to buy plants. So we started propagating, filled the garden, and as the years went past, we couldn't stop propagating. This area, which is backed by the wood pile, which I'm very keen on for getting beetles and insects, has just got numerous woodlanders in it, and they're all seeding around and intermingling, which is rather nice. From the Trillium ovata right up at the top, through Trillium albidum, which is the one that's a bit of a weed and it's just seeded all over the place. And we've got Simile. I can see the lovely maroon in the centre. Sometimes Simile hangs below, and sometimes it comes up above the leaves. And interspersed, we've got the pink Erythronium revolutum, which is everywhere in the garden. This garden is on a south-facing sandstone hill, and it's an acid sand. They love being in woodland conditions because of the leaf fall, so lovely rich soil, and they get the drainage during the summer because the trees are taking all the moisture out of the soil. Here we have Erythronium White Beauty. It's one of the hybrids, and it's very prolific. It divides beautifully, and you get wonderful clumps like these, and it shows how Erythroniums grow in tree roots. And it's a very good example of the silver veining in the leaf. These are my nursery beds. This is Erythronium toluminense. It's from Yosemite Park, from the high meadows. It has several flowers on a spike, and it's always very early. It's the first one to be out, usually, of the mainstream North American bulbs. They're very promiscuous, you know, Erythroniums. They breed with one another really quite freely. This was a cross that I found in the garden. It has a huge flower power. You can see here that you're getting, on average 3 flowers per stem, but they're a good-sized flower. And you've got the greeny colour backing here from Oregonum, and you've got the pink coming from the Revolutum. They're special to me because they were found, this hybrid was found in my garden, and then gradually over the years I isolated it and bulked it up. It's called Erythronium Elizabeth. They hate being in pots. I keep them in pots for the shortest possible time. If you're going to divide your Erythronium clump when it's got too congested, don't do it now. I'm just doing this to demonstrate it to you. So let's see what we find. And here's a lovely example of next year's bulb. You'll see very clearly why they've got the common name of dog's tooth violet. This new growth, this will get bigger and bigger, so please don't divide your plants until they're very, very dormant in August. If I were to start, I would start where I started. The yellow hybrids, and pagoda is commonly available, and the white beauty. This year's bulb will probably give you 2 bulbs next year. So it's really quite easy to get a clump, and then you can divide the clump and walk them around the garden. They're like a newborn baby. They're just perfect, I think, in every way. Well, they calm me down, you know. You can just look at them and feel everything relaxing because they're covering the ground and they're drifting off into the distance. Yes, they're good for my well-being, a very fashionable term.
I loved that garden and I loved that story, how that space was built over a lifetime together. And I think that says everything about our gardens. They really are a part of who we are, and it's lovely to see. Come on, Roo. Isn't it lovely hearing the birds of spring? There's so many here. But it does make it slightly problematic sometimes when you want to do some pruning in the garden, because this is the time of year when they're most actively nesting. Now, between the 1st of March and the 31st of August, it is strongly recommended that you don't do any hedge pruning. But if you have one shrub that might need shaping, you just need to be absolutely sure that you're not disturbing any nesting birds, because that is against the law. So what you need to do is you need to observe that shrub for a couple of days and make sure no birds are coming and going, because that would be a sure sign of active nesting activity. If there are no signs of any birds, then when you've decided to give it a prune, before you make any snips, just ever so gently look inside the structure and make sure you can't see any nests. So this is a lovely filaria. The garden is full of them and they give a beautiful shape. This has got very, very delicate leaves, a great alternative to box. You can use a hedge trimmer if you like, but I like to use a clean, sharp pair of shears like this and just go in gently. You can always take more off, you can't stick it back on. And make sure you regularly step back just to observe the shape you've created. Get this rosemary out of the way, don't want to clip that. Pruning is my favourite gardening job. There's something really, really mindful about it because you observe whatever it is you're cutting, whether it's a rose or some topiary like this. You think about its shape. You can really change the feel of the garden by doing one simple job. It makes everything feel neater. But it's just like the sound of the shears and the feel of it going through. It's just a really, really pleasant job to do. What you want to do with anything like this is take off the woolliness. Now with the box, actually, quite like it being left a bit unkempt and woolly because it's a nice dense structure, but here it would turn into a really big shrub, whereas obviously what you're wanting is this set of 3 lovely spheres. And I have found that box that aren't clipped have been more resilient to attacks by the caterpillars because you're not putting them under unnecessary stress. So it's taking off the woolliness without going too far back into the wood, especially as we still do have risk of cold nights, and these can get damaged by frost if they've just been clipped. So it's gentle, but enough to give it that definition and shape. Pruning like this is one of those timely jobs that helps the garden stay in check and really helps your view of the garden as well. But Toby is sharing some of his best gardening tips from his garden down in Devon.
Gardening is so life affirming. Every day I do it, I make new discoveries, have surprises, and there's always so much to learn. And whether you've got window boxes or acreage to look after, you're always on a journey of finding out more. I've been gardening here for 20 years, and it's on a sloping site. It's quite difficult to deal with. The thing about sloping sites is that soil always goes downhill, and I built these retaining walls to hold it back. But over the years, as I've added compost, the soil levels have built up and it's still falling over the wall. And that's where agapanthus comes in. You see, this stuff is like a palisade, a retaining wall that grows that will hold back the earth. And now is the ideal window of opportunity to lift, divide it and turn it into a living wall. Here in Devon, I'm using evergreen agapanthus, but any tough evergreen herbaceous plant would do the same job. Lifting and dividing agapanthus isn't for the faint-hearted, because the roots are really fleshy and they just grab hold of the soil. You've got to be cruel to be kind, you've got to be rough to get them out of the soil. You always know you're winning when you hear this sound. Victory. I'll just get this out where we can work on it. Now, ideally, when you're lifting and dividing plants, you use back-to-back forks or your fingers to tear. It looks very brutal, but it's better than using the spade because you actually maintain more of the root. So the regrowth and establishment is so much quicker. And look at that, the perfect clump. Loads of growing points and buds and a tangle of roots at the base. Into the soil, same depth as it was before. This looks a bit beat up now, but with the growing season ahead, this will bounce back and will probably flower this summer. I love this little corner of the garden in the dappled shade. I walk past it all the time because it's at the junction of two paths, summer and winter. And it's in winter I get the most pleasure from it because I grow plants that flower right at the beginning of the bang, the start of the growing season. There's crocus and there's snowdrops, long gone now, but also hellebores, glorious things, just going to seed. Now these things are expensive to buy, but once you've got one, they're so easy to propagate if you use this trick. What I've got in my bucket is leaf mould, and this is the perfect medium for getting woodland plants like hellebores to sprout and grow on their own and set their seed. All I do every year is just chuck it on the soil as a mulch. It locks in moisture, and oriental hellebores need that in summer, but it also acts as a little bed for when the seeds from the flowers tumble out and then fall onto the ground, and honestly they come up like cress. I like this type of gardening because it's, well, it's not just working with Mother Nature, it's kind of giving her a helping hand. And if you don't believe me, have a look at this. Look at the clutch of free plants I've got in there. All you do is get in there, gently lever them up from the soil. Look at that. An oriental hellebore for free. Lots of us love cats. This is Richard Parker. And Rich does cause problems loitering around certain parts of the garden. But there are ways to keep our feline friends off bare soil, and they're also good for keeping down the weeds, which we all have. Isn't that right, Rich? I knew you'd agree. A great plant to quickly cover bare soil and keep Rich and his mates away is Iberian comfrey. Cats don't like its bristly leaves, but bees absolutely love it. You can lift and divide it at any time of year. Just cut back the tops and keep it well watered after planting. And an easy way to cover a lot of ground fast is to plant the stems horizontally, creating a matrix across the soil that connects together. They root so quickly and establish before you know it. Instant ground cover. Sorry, Rich. I spend a lot of time in the greenhouse in spring, because what's humming a tune in spring in the greenhouse is singing a song in summer. That's how I look at it. And I save a lot of seeds from year to year. Keep the seed from your plot from one year into the next, and then from that year into the one that follows. You develop what's known as a land race, which is a postcode specific strain of seeds that suits your garden. And that's what I've been doing with tomatillos. Now, back in the autumn, the last of the plants, I just put the fruits on top of this pot of compost. Tomatillos, right, they look like tomatoes, but they've got a net curtain casing around the outside of them. And inside, you see, the net curtains are full of seeds. But they're seeds with a difference, because the fruit, as it rots, it strips away the waxy cuticle from those seeds and makes them incredibly easy to sprout. Come the spring, given just a splash of water to wash that seed into the compost, I kid you not, those kernels, you'll see them sprouting almost within a day. Here, just to prove the point, is a pot of tomatillos that I watered last week. Look at those beauties. Now, these tomatillos will need to go into individual pots and be grown on frost-free until the cold weather clears. Because they're cheap bajal, it would be a game to get in there and prick them out, but there is a quicker and easier method. Give the pot a shake, and then the whole lot comes out onto my potting bench in one go like that. But because I've opened up the compost, you see, they'll peel out as individuals even when they've got long and forked roots, which is something you would never be able to do if you were pricking out conventionally using a dibber. It's a really satisfying method. And part of that is because at the back end of the year, when the growing season is coming to an end and I'm putting the fruit on the compost, I know that it won't be long before I'm watering them again and spring will be out of the blocks. Wonderful.
I think the lovely thing is that as the garden wakes up, so does the gardener. You get all that energy of spring yourself, which you do need because there are so many jobs to do at this time of the year. Oh look, a bee fly on the forget-me-nots. Really is spring. They're magical to watch. What I'm doing here is actually dividing some lily of the valley. It's not the ideal time to do that because it's about to flower. You'd really do it later in the year when it's finished that. But there's a big clump of it here and it's spreading. They have some fairly aggressive rhizomes that can take over a space if they're happy. And the kinds of conditions that will make them happy are partial shade, particularly shade in the spring, because they're woodland plants. So dry shade before the canopy comes out will get them very happily flowering, and then they'll go dormant later in the year. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some gloves on because they are very poisonous, lily of the valley, and also it's an irritant to the skin. Right, there we go. Oops, casualty. But you can see that's a really, really healthy clump of them, and they are about to flower. These are the flower buds here. Now those flowers are tiny little white bells and they smell absolutely incredible. I'm actually going to put it into a little pot that I can place by the door or by an open window or a regularly opened window so that you can get that scent in the house. And I'm just going to use the soil from the ground here rather than getting lots of compost. That's a really nice way of using them. You get the best of their season at this point, up at eye level, and somewhere you can see and smell them. And then once they've gone over, you can take this, empty it out, and then plant them somewhere else in the garden where they can begin to do this and spread around. That's one thing off the list. But here are some other jobs that you can be getting on with this weekend. It's time to remove these winter salads that have started to go over in the greenhouse. Once they go to flower, the leaves turn bitter and the plants take up precious space that we'll need for spring sowings. But don't be too quick to clear the lot. Leaving a few to flower is brilliant for insects and adds a lovely touch of colour. And later, you can harvest the seeds for next winter's crops. You can make the most of fallen branches and twiggy bits left after cutting back herbaceous plants. Rather than throwing them out, build little habitat piles. Deadwood is brilliant for insects, and the nooks and crannies give small creatures somewhere to shelter. You can even weave branches into a simple dead hedge. It's a lovely way to tidy the garden while creating a home for wildlife. With the start of warm spring days, it's safe to take the salvias I put into the greenhouse for a bit of winter protection out to start hardening off. I like to give them a trim to encourage fresh, bushy growth. They'll enjoy the extra light and airflow, but do keep an eye on temperatures. If there's a hit of late frost, pop them back under cover or throw a fleece over them. It's lovely to be back at Damson Farm in the spring and seeing the damson blossom, and that little reminder to get out and enjoy those fleeting moments whilst they're here at this time of year. But next week, Monty is back with a special programme from Regent's Park in London, where he'll be joining the Royal Parks team as they work to finish a brand new public garden designed to commemorate what would have been our late Queen's 100th birthday. See you then.